Power can make an arrogant man feel completely invincible until he pulls over the wrong driver. When a corrupt patrolman illegally tore apart a wealthy black grandmother's supercar, he thought he was untouchable. He had no idea the woman he humiliated was his new boss. This is ultimate karma. The Pacific Coast Highway was bathed in the golden dying light of a Tuesday evening. Josephine Reynolds, 61 years old, sat behind the wheel of a metallic midnight blue Aston Martin DBS Superleggera. The twin-turbo 512 engine purred with a restrained, terrifying power, but Josephine drove exactly 3 m under the speed limit. Her silver locks were pulled back into a neat, elegant twist, and she wore a tailored linen blazer over a simple white blouse. She was a grandmother of 4, a widow, and a woman who had spent 35 grueling years surviving and climbing the ranks of the Chicago Police Department. She was in the affluent coastal enclave of Oakport to retire, or so the public thought. In reality, Oakport City Council had quietly hired her to gut their notoriously corrupt police department. But tonight, she was just a woman enjoying a drive in a retirement gift she had bought for herself after decades of public service. 2 miles behind her, Officer Derek Taggart was bored. Taggart was a 12-year veteran of the Oakport Police Department, a man whose thick neck and heavy swagger compensated for a career defined by mediocrity and a startling number of excessive force complaints that the local police union had always managed to sweep under the rug. Sitting in the passenger seat of their cruiser was Officer Wyatt Miller, a 23-year-old rookie who was barely 3 months out of the academy. When the Aston Martin glided past their speed trap, Taggart's eyes narrowed. "Look at this," Taggart muttered, shifting the cruiser into drive. $250,000 on wheels. "She's not speeding, man," Wyatt pointed out, checking the radar gun. "Clocked her at 52 in a 55. "I don't care," Taggart sneered, accelerating rapidly onto the highway. "You see who's driving that thing? An older black woman in an Aston Martin with out-of-state plates in Oakport. Either she stole it or her grandson is moving weight, and she's out here spending the cartel's money. Flip the lights." "Derek, we don't have probable cause," Wyatt said, his stomach tightening. "I said flip the lights, rookie." "She crossed the double yellow. I saw it." "You saw it." Wyatt hadn't seen anything of the sort, but the unspoken rule of the Oakport PD was that you didn't cross Derek Taggart. With a heavy sigh, Wyatt activated the sirens and the flashing red and blues. Ahead of them, Josephine saw the lights in her rear-view mirror. A deep, weary sigh escaped her lips. She activated her turn signal, slowly and safely, maneuvering the low-slung supercar onto the wide gravel shoulder of the highway. She shifted the car into park, rolled down her window, and placed both of her hands on the leather steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. It was the textbook maneuver she had taught rookies in Chicago for decades. Taggart approached the vehicle with his hand resting aggressively on the butt of his service weapon. He didn't bother with a flashlight. The highway street lamps provided enough illumination to see Josephine's calm, unbothered expression. "License, registration, and proof of insurance." Taggart barked, skipping any form of professional greeting. He leaned heavily against the driver's side door, intentionally smudging the pristine paint job with his tactical vest. "Good evening, officer," Josephine said, her voice smooth, deep, and steady. "May I ask why I am being pulled over?" "I ask the questions here," Taggart snapped. "Hand over the documents before I rip you out of this vehicle for resisting." Josephine did not flinch. 35 years in law enforcement had immunized her to the intimidation tactics of small-minded men in uniforms. She knew exactly what Taggart was doing. She also knew that the Oakport mayor had placed a strict embargo on her identity until tomorrow morning's press conference. As far as the world was concerned, she was just Josephine Reynolds, civilian. "My license is in my purse on the passenger seat," Josephine stated clearly, narrating her movements to ensure there were no misunderstandings. She slowly retrieved her Illinois driver's license and the car's registration, handing them through the window. Taggart snatched them. He barely glanced at the name. "Josephine, huh? Whose car is this?" "Josephine. It is my vehicle, officer." "Right. Sure it is." Taggart laughed mockingly. He shone a bright tactical flashlight directly into her eyes, though she was fully illuminated. "Step out of the car." Wyatt, standing nervously near the rear bumper, stepped forward. "Derek, we just need to run the plates." "Shut up, Wyatt," Taggart barked. He turned his attention back to Josephine. I said, "Step out of the vehicle now, officer. Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have the right to order me out of the vehicle," Josephine said calmly, reciting the Supreme Court precedent perfectly. "But I would like to establish for the record that I have committed no traffic violation, and you have no reasonable, articulable suspicion to detain me." Taggart's face flushed a deep, violent crimson. He despised civilians who knew the law, and he especially despised minorities who spoke to him as equals. "Get out of the damn car before I smash this window and drag you out by your hair," Taggart roared, his hand unfastening the retention strap on his holster. Josephine remained perfectly composed, though her jaw tightened. She opened the door and stepped out into the cool ocean breeze. She was only 5 feet 5 inches, but she carried herself with a towering, immovable dignity. "Turn around, hands on the roof," Taggart ordered. Josephine complied. Taggart immediately began patting her down. A brazen violation of protocol, considering Wyatt was standing right there, and a female officer should have been called for a Terry frisk, let alone the fact that there was no suspicion of a weapon. "What are we looking for, officer?" Josephine asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Shut up," Taggart hissed. Finding nothing on her person, he turned his attention to the Aston Martin. Without asking for consent, he leaned into the driver's side and began tearing the interior apart. He yanked the glove box open, dumping registration papers, napkins, and a tire gauge onto the floor mats. He shoved his hands violently between the custom leather seats, scratching the center console with his utility belt. "Officer, you do not have my consent to search this vehicle," Josephine stated firmly. "I smell marijuana," Taggart lied smoothly, a rehearsed line he had used 100 times before to manufacture probable cause. "That gives me the right to search whatever I want." Wyatt looked at the ground, his face pale. There was no smell of marijuana. There was only the scent of new leather and expensive perfume. Taggart popped the trunk. He found a small leather briefcase. He unlatched it, hoping to find stacks of cash or contraband. Instead, he found thick, heavily redacted files, dossier on the Oakport Police Department's internal affairs records. Taggart, however, was too blinded by his own adrenaline and arrogance to read the headers on the files. He saw a small velvet box next to the papers. He ripped it open, revealing a gleaming gold badge. Taggart scoffed, tossing the box back into the trunk. "What is this? An honorary sheriff's badge from a crackerjack box? Fake police paraphernalia. I should write you up for impersonating an officer. I strongly suggest you put that back exactly where you found it," Josephine said, her voice dropping an octave, carrying the distinct razor-sharp authority of a commanding officer. Taggart froze for a second. The tone of her voice was deeply unsettling, triggering a subconscious instinct he couldn't quite place, but his ego quickly squashed the feeling. He slammed the trunk shut. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood, Grandma," Taggart said, walking back to her. He shoved her driver's license against her chest. "I'm writing you a citation for failure to maintain a lane. Next time you drive through my town, you better look over your shoulder. Now, get out of here before I decide to tow this shiny little toy of yours." Josephine took the license. She looked at Taggart's badge. Taggart D, badge number 4492. She committed it to memory. Then she looked at the trembling rookie. Miller W, badge number 5103. "Have a good evening, officers," Josephine said softly. She got back into her car, ignoring the mess Taggart had made of her passenger seat, and drove away. In the cruiser, Taggart was laughing. "See that rookie? That's how you handle them. You got to show them who runs the streets. I guarantee you she'll never drive through Oakport again." Wyatt stared out the window into the darkness, a heavy sinking feeling in his gut. Yeah, right. The Oakport Police Precinct was a brutalist concrete building that smelled perpetually of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and sweat. At 7:30 a.m. the next morning, the locker room was buzzing with a frenetic, nervous energy. The previous chief of police had been forced into early retirement a month ago after a local journalist exposed a massive embezzlement scandal involving police pension funds. Today was the dawn of a new era. Mayor William Stanton was personally coming to the precinct to introduce the new chief of police. Rumors had been swirling for weeks. The union reps swore the mayor was promoting Captain Hodges, an Oakport lifer who would keep the status quo. Derek Taggart stood in front of his locker, meticulously adjusting his uniform tie. He was in high spirits. With Hodgers expected to take the chief's office, Taggart had been practically promised a promotion to sergeant. Looking sharp, Taggart, Officer Bradley Jenkins said, slapping Derek on the shoulder. Ready for the new boss? Hodges is a good man, Taggart grinned. He knows how the streets work. He knows you can't police this town with kid gloves. We'll be fine. Across the room, Wyatt Miller was quietly lacing up his boots. He hadn't slept a wink. The image of the elegant, composed black woman standing on the side of the highway while Taggart trashed her car haunted him. He knew he should have intervened. He knew he should have turned on his body camera, which Taggart had conveniently told him to leave off. Hey, Miller. Taggart barked across the benches. You look like a ghost. Shake it off. Today is a good day. We're getting the department back on track. At 7:55 a.m., the intercom crackled to life. All available personnel, report to the main assembly room. Mandatory briefing in 5 minutes. The assembly room was a massive auditorium lined with rows of folding chairs. Nearly 200 officers, detectives, and administrative staff piled in. A sea of navy blue uniforms. Taggart took a seat in the second row, making sure he was visible. He wanted the new chief to see his face. Wyatt sat nervously in the back row near the exit. At exactly 8 a.m. the side door opened. Mayor William Stanton walked onto the wooden stage. He was a tall, severe-looking man who had campaigned heavily on police reform. The room fell into a tense silence. Good morning, Mayor Stanton began stepping up to the podium. He adjusted his microphone, his eyes scanning the crowd of officers. For the past 5 years, the Oakport Police Department has been plagued by scandal, corruption, and a severe breach of public trust. We have settled over $14 million in excessive force lawsuits. This department is broken. A low murmur of dissent rippled through the veteran officers. Taggart crossed his arms, rolling his eyes. Here we go with the political garbage, he thought. The citizens of Oakport deserve a police force that serves and protects, not one that terrorizes and steals. The mayor continued, his voice rising in volume. Which is why when searching for a new chief of police, I did not look internally. The rot in this precinct goes too deep. Taggart's smug expression vanished. The officers around him exchanged confused, panicked glances. Not internal. I sought out a leader with an unimpeachable record, Mayor Stanton said. Someone who spent 35 years in the Chicago Police Department, rising from a beat cop to the deputy chief of internal affairs. Someone who has dismantled corrupt precincts from the inside out. I am proud to introduce the new chief of the Oakport Police Department, Chief Josephine Reynolds. The double doors at the rear of the stage swung open. The room went dead silent. Footsteps echoed sharply against the hardwood floor. Out from the shadows walked Josephine. She was dressed in a pristine, immaculate classy uniform. 4 gold stars gleamed on each side of her collar. The gold badge that Taggart had dismissed as a Cracker Jack toy the night before was pinned perfectly to her chest, catching the fluorescent lights of the auditorium. She walked to the podium with the lethal, measured grace of a predator, entering a cage full of cornered prey. In the second row, Derek Taggart stopped breathing. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of ash gray. His heart slammed against his ribs like a trapped bird. The thick, arrogant sneer melted off his lips, replaced by a look of absolute, unadulterated terror. It was her, the grandmother, the Aston Martin, the woman he had illegally searched, verbally abused, and threatened on the highway less than 14 hours ago. Josephine stood at the podium. She did not look at her notes. She looked directly out into the crowd. Her eyes scanned the rows of shocked faces until they locked dead onto Derek Taggart. When she found him, she didn't blink. A slow, chillingly calm smile spread across her face. Good morning, officers, Chief Josephine Reynolds said into the microphone, her deep, authoritative voice echoing through the silent room. I trust you all had a productive evening on patrol last night. The temperature in the room dropped by exactly 20 degrees. Chief Josephine Reynolds did not yell, nor did she pound her fists against the wooden podium. She simply let the crushing weight of her presence settle over the hundreds of officers before her. In the second row, Derek Taggart felt a cold bead of sweat trace a slow, agonizing path down his spine. His mind raced frantically, trying to calculate the odds that she had forgotten his face. But the terrifying, unwavering intensity in her dark eyes told him everything he needed to know. She remembered every second. For decades, This badge has been used by a select few as a shield for criminality, Josephine continued, her voice slicing through the heavy silence like a scalpel. That ends today. I have spent the last 35 years dismantling networks of officers who believe their uniform placed them above the Constitution. I have read your personnel files. I know the complaints that were buried. I know the citizens who were silenced. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room before locking back onto Taggett. And I know exactly how some of you behave when you think nobody is watching now. In the back row, rookie Wyatt Miller felt a bizarre mixture of profound relief and paralyzing dread. The woman he had watched endure a humiliating illegal search the night before was now the most powerful law enforcement officer in the city. He remembered the calm, calculated way she had placed her hands on the steering wheel, the precise legal statutes she had quoted, and the chilling warning she had delivered when Taggett touched her badge. She had not been a helpless civilian. She had been a seasoned predator, quietly observing a reckless scavenger step blindly into her trap early today. "We are going to clean house," Josephine declared, her tone leaving absolutely zero room for negotiation or debate. "Starting immediately, every officer with more than 3 unresolved excessive force complaints will be placed on administrative leave pending a full, uncompromising internal review. If you have violated the oath you swore to this city, I suggest you hand in your resignation by noon today. If you choose to stay and fight, I promise you, I will personally see to it that you are stripped of your pension and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. You are all dismissed now." The room erupted into a chaotic murmur the moment she stepped away from the podium. Mayor Stanton followed her off the stage, leaving the stunned officers to process the earthquake that had just shattered their world. Taggett shot out of his chair as if the seat had caught fire. He needed to find Sergeant John Smith, his union representative. He needed protection. He shoved his way through the crowd of panicked cops, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. He finally spotted Smith near the exit, frantically typing on his phone. Taggett violently grabbed the older man by the shoulder. "John, I need a union rep right now." Taggart hissed, his voice trembling despite his desperate attempt to maintain his tough exterior. Smith looked up, his face pale and drawn. He slowly put his phone away and shook his head, refusing to meet Taggett and his panicked gaze. "I cannot help you, Derek," Smith whispered, taking a deliberate step back from him. Clear his throat. "What are you talking about?" "You are the union rep. I pay my dues," Taggett snapped. "The new chief just sent a directive to my phone," Smith replied quietly. "She wants you in her office right now on this very day." Taggett felt the floor completely drop out from beneath him. The blood rushing in his ears sounded like a freight train. He turned around and saw Wyatt Miller standing a few feet away, looking like he was about to face a firing squad. Without another word, Smith walked away, abandoning Taggett to his fate. The walk to the chief office on the 4th floor felt like a funeral march. Every step echoed loudly in the sterile, brightly lit hallway. Taggart tried to convince himself that he could talk his way out of this. He was a veteran cop after all. When they reached the heavy oak door of the chief office, Taggart hesitated. His hand shook violently as he reached for the brass handle. He swallowed hard, pushing the door open. Josephine Reynolds was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk. She was no longer wearing her uniform jacket, but the gold stars on her collar still gleamed with ruthless authority. The files from her trunk that Taggett had carelessly tossed aside were neatly stacked in front of her. To her right stood 2 men in sharp black suits. Internal affairs investigators from the state capitol. Taggett stopped breathing right there. "Close the door, Officer Taggett," Josephine instructed, her voice deceptively soft. Taggett obeyed, his legs feeling like lead. Wyatt stood frozen next to him, staring intently at the floor. "Take a seat," she commanded. They both sat down in the stiff leather chairs facing her desk. Josephine opened a silver laptop, tapped a few keys, and turned the screen toward them. His stomach dropped. Playing on the screen was crystal clear footage of the traffic stop from the night before, but it was not from the cruiser dash camera. The angle was different. It was actually her car. "My vehicle is equipped with a full military-grade surveillance system," Josephine explained, folding her hands neatly on the desk. "It records audio and video, uploading it directly to a secure cloud server in real time. I watched you manufacture probable cause, physically assault my property, and perform an illegal frisk without the presence of a female officer. You violated 4 separate department protocols and 3 constitutional amendments in the span of 7 minutes. Taggett opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was bone dry. No words came out. He was completely trapped in a dark, deep corner today. "Chief, I can explain," Taggart stammered, his tough facade shattering into pathetic pieces. It was dark. There have been many drug runners on that stretch of the highway lately. I was just being thorough. I made a judgment call based on my experience in the field. Josephine let out a short, humorous laugh that sent a fresh wave of terror through his veins. She leaned forward, her dark eyes piercing straight through his pathetic excuses. "You made a judgment call based on the color of my skin and the price of my expensive sports car on the road last night." She pointed a manicured finger at the thick file stacked on her desk. "But last night was not an isolated incident. Was it, Derek? These are the internal affairs dossier that you were too arrogant to read when you illegally searched my trunk. They detailed 12 years of brutality, racial profiling, and outright theft. The previous administration looked the other way because you brought in high arrest numbers. But I do not care about your statistics. I care about the law." Josephine nodded to the 2 men in suits, standing quietly in the corner of her very spacious office room. "Officer Wyatt Miller," Josephine said, shifting her gaze to the terrified rookie. Wyatt jumped slightly in his chair. "Yes, Chief," he croaked, his voice cracking. "You are 3 months out of the academy. Last night, you stood by and watched a senior officer violate the civil rights of a motorist. You did not intervene. You did not report it." "What?" Wyatt swallowed hard, tears brimming in his eyes. "He told me to keep my mouth shut, Chief," he said. "That is how things work here. I was scared. I am sorry. I know I failed my duty right there completely." Josephine studied the young man for a long moment. The anger in her eyes softened, replaced by a stern, maternal disappointment. "Fear is not an excuse for cowardice, Miller, but I know what it is like to be a rookie under the thumb of a corrupt veteran." Then came the twist that made his heart stop completely. "What Taggart does not know is that you were not assigned to his cruiser by accident. I selected you, Miller, because I needed an unimpeachable witness who was not already on his payroll to corroborate the footage we were going to capture there." Taggart whipped his head around to stare at Wyatt, sheer betrayal and fury flashing across his face. "You set me up," Taggart snarled, lunging out of his chair toward the rookie. Before Taggart could even take a full step, the 2 agents were on him. They grabbed his arms, twisting them painfully behind his back, and slammed him face first onto the polished mahogany desk. "Stay down," one of the agents barked, pressing his forearm firmly against the back of his thick neck. Taggart gasped for air, his cheek pressed flat against the cold wood of the mahogany desktop. "I did not set you up, Derek," Josephine said calmly, remaining perfectly still as the violent scene unfolded directly in front of her. "I simply drove my car on a public highway. You chose to pull me over. You chose to break the law. You set yourself up. I just provided the stage." She stood up, walking around the desk to look down at the disgraced officer. "Officer Derek Taggart, you are officially terminated from the Oakport Police Department, effective immediately. Furthermore, you are under arrest for civil rights violations, official oppression, and battery under color of state law today." The broken man wept softly as they dragged him away. Oakport was finally safe under her new firm command forever. Karma never misses an address, especially when arrogance blinds you to the truth. This powerful grandmother proved that true authority does not need to shout. It only needs to wait for the perfect moment to strike. If you love this satisfying story of justice served cold, please hit the like button. Share this incredible video with all your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing real-life drama twists and thrilling karma stories every single week, right? Yeah.